Alright everyone, welcome back. Today we're going through an updated settings guide for the brand new game, The First Descendant. So let's get into it with the settings that I think you need to set up to make the absolute best out of this brand new third person action shooter, RPG, looter shooter thingamabob. So there is a few important settings, to be honest, that are going to improve the feel, the look of the game, and just how you move your characters around. So to access the menu, then in game you just need to do a long press to bring up the game menu and then go to the options. Now the only one that you can't access through this is from the graphics settings. Now you can only access this through the opening main menu. They may change this at some point, but at the minute that's the only way you can change the graphics setting from either performance or fidelity, or if you do have a higher 120Hz refresh monitor, then I believe there's a few other options there, with balanced possibly being the best one. I'm a pauper, so I don't have access to that. So in terms of what I have access to, then I've got fidelity, which is basically give this game a graphical boost, but it's also going to reduce the frames to around roughly 30 frames per second. Or there is performance, which is going to give you an increase in the frames per second, but the graphical fidelity of it is decreased somewhat in game. I jump and change between both of them, to be honest, but in my last settings guide I recommended fidelity mode and got absolutely flamed for it. So guess what, this time we're recommending performance mode. So there you go, chop and change whichever one you want, but to be honest, performance mode does feel the best. But if you want that updated graphics version and you can deal with the lower frames per second, then fidelity mode the way to go, especially with this Unreal Engine 5 game. And I think there's going to be some room for it being optimized as well in the near future, so it may actually get a little bit better on these graphics settings. In terms of motion blur, then that is also personal preference. I mean, this is a looter shooter game, there's no PvP gameplay or anything like that, so you're not going to be hindered. But I think if you want to keep motion blur on, then it's not going to hinder you, although the way that I like to set up this game, I do actually prefer to have motion blur off, because it's going to mean that when you're spinning around and you're taking out enemies, especially at higher levels of gameplay and stuff like that, where you're getting overwhelmed by enemies, then I think motion blur is potentially going to hinder you, so turn that one off in my opinion. In terms of gameplay settings, then there's a few here. Obviously the cross-platform settings are turned on as default, so that means that you can cross-play if you need to across any of your platforms of choice. In terms of in-game gamer tags, then that's really not going to cause you too many issues, especially if you're playing with friends. You're going to be able to see who and where they are. Chat settings, then the chat window can be a little bit immersion breaking in my opinion. In terms of if you're a solo player, then the chat box may become usable if you're grinding higher level activities and you want to talk to your allies in any of the match made content. In terms of its visibility and stuff, then I'd keep that as standard, to be honest. The weapon display options, then you've got the options to turn on the weapon damage details and show the status effect text, which is just going to increase the ease of use for that, but again that may decrease the immersion aspect of this game. So I mean, I would just keep these ones off as standard. Again, likewise with the control method for the grappling hook and the HUD guide, then just keep these ones on for now. They don't seem to affect gameplay that much, and in terms of what you're going to be doing within the game, then these options really are going to have minimal impact, to be honest. Moving on to the audio settings, then obviously you can have text and voice chat in whichever language you wish to have that one in, and that's going to obviously change the language settings in game. In terms of voice chat options, then you do have party chat and squad channel for any of the gameplay options, so just adjust them volumes as required for yourself in game. And likewise with the music and the sound effects, that again is going to be personal preference and not something that we're going to massively go through in this one. In terms of display options, then you do get an option to go through a little bit of this when you boot up the game in terms of brightness and contrast. The main one that I like to crank up is the field of view. Now you can max this one up to, I believe it's 120, which is going to possibly give you that fishbowl effect, and I know that a lot of people don't like that. So I think 105 is a good sweet spot, but definitely be looking at increasing this, especially if you're on PC and you've got them wider screen monitors, or you're playing on console on a wider screen TV, then that bog standard field of view is quite limiting, to be honest. We do have a ton of colorblind options as well for green, red and blue color blindness. Also, you do get an option for the city camera within these options, and that's just going to give you a little bit of a further field of view when you are running around the Albion, which is the main hub of this game. Now, the main settings that I think you do want to go through are the controller settings. Honestly, this game is quite fast paced, and the base settings of the controller settings are absolutely abysmal in my opinion. Now, the cursor speed is going to be how quick you can move the cursor within the menus, and to be honest, I think you want to crank that one up to about 15 to 20. Just mess around with it as to what you think is going to be the best in terms of that one. Vibration again is also personal preference. If you're playing on controller, then you might want to turn vibration off just to maybe save the battery life, but again, it is a PvE game, so you can keep that one on for a little bit of a better immersion. Inverting the X and Y axis is also not really too much of an issue, but the main one that I like to change and crank up is the X and Y axis normal sensitivity and the aim sensitivity. As you can see here, I cranked the X up to 90 and I have also cracked the Y up to about 79. That just means that in game that this is so much easier and you are going to be able to move around way quicker. And then in terms of like aiming, I think that you need to crank this one up. It is really low for some reason, but you want to get that up to like at least 60 and at least 40. Mess around with that yourself as to what you think your little sweet point is, but these 4 settings are some of the main ones that you really do need to sort out in game as a matter of course as soon as you boot it up. You've also got aim assist, which is really just not going to be too much of an issue. I would keep that one on because the enemies are quite small. You do want that little bit of reticle friction as you are aiming over them, whether you're aiming down sights or hip firing. And to be fair, the rest of the settings have been pretty much ironed out from what they were back when the beta and other versions of the game that I've managed to play. It's been really fine-tuned, and apart from the sensitivity settings, which are really going to make a massive difference, especially in higher level content, then I think that is the way to go in terms of the settings. And honestly, a ton of these are personal preference. I think the graphics settings may be one that you might want to mess around with, especially if you have more options depending on your monitor of choice. But all in all, just a quick breakdown of the settings. I hope you enjoyed it. Got a few more videos for the First Descendant coming up real soon. If you like this video and you want more of the First Descendant content, then please consider dropping a like and leaving a sub for more of the First Descendant content, and I'll catch you in the next video, which you can click right here.